This is Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde.
When you say that there's major revenue news in the NHL, it can put people to sleep. However, when you say there's major revenue news and you say this might have an effect on the cap, or it almost certainly has an effect on the cap, which it always does, then some ears perk up. So Allan Walsh joining us today to explain this whole thing, because the reports came out this morning that players are going to be returned all of the money that they paid into escrow and potentially be paid back more than they paid in. So Allan, let's start with escrow itself. Really basic explainer for anybody that doesn't already know. What is it?
So escrow is the mechanism in the CBA where the revenue share is split 50-50. Okay. If at the end of the season, the league has received more, the owners, the teams have received more than 50%, the money in escrow is returned to the players to balance it out to 50-50. Right. If at the end of the season, the players collectively have received more than 50% of HRR, money is then released from a third-party escrow account, is then released back to the league, to the owners, to again equalize so that at the end of every season, the league and the players have received exactly 50% each of defined revenues, HRR, each year.
Okay, so let's talk about that just quickly for a second. Escrow has been high in previous years. We've seen escrow get quite high. How high has it gotten? And is that on your total paycheck? So let's say a player makes, for rounding purposes, $10 million, okay? Super easy to round that. When escrow's been high, how much money has been taken out of that $10 million for that one single player to contribute to that third party?
So historically, escrow has been as high as 22-23%.
Crazy.
In the pandemic year, it was 17.95%. And many years, escrow came in at 14, 15, 16% off the face value of a player's contract. And it's all player comp, whether it's signing bonus, salary, individual player bonuses, for example, entry-level players or players over 35 who have bonuses. Buyout money is subject to escrow when it's paid out. So escrow hits everything, everywhere. There have been misinformation in the past that, the reason why players do signing bonus isn't subject to escrow. Not true. Escrow applies to all compensation.
So when you're talking about our $10 million hypothetical player here, when it's 17.9%, that means that player is giving $1.79 million to this third party and may never see it again unless it's all evened out at the end of the year. And in a lot of years, it wasn't. It would just be gone. So your $10 million contract really becomes a $7.9 million contract or an $8 million contract if we're rounding.
Right. So when players get paid signing bonus or get paid salary, when escrow is set for the season, that money is deducted from the player's payroll check, which they receive every 2 years, and goes into this bank account.
Right.
And the bank account is a money market account earning nominal interest that the league and the players do not have direct control over. There has to be a mutual agreement between the parties on when monies held in escrow are released and to who it's going to be released to, whether back to the league or back to the players.
And since the beginning of this season, obviously, like every year, escrow's been collected. And so what we're finding out is that escrow, and we're only in January of this season, escrow collected this year will be returned to the players. And revenues are so high on the league side with the teams that they will then have to compensate the players. It's almost like the league has to put themselves in escrow and compensate the players already to even out what the payments will be at the end of the year. Is that correct?
Yeah. So let's go back just a little bit.
Okay.
HRR has not yet been finalized going all the way back to the 2021-22 season.
Okay.
So there are still outstanding issues of dispute between what is the actual HRR numbers going back to 21-22. That needs to get finalized. Mm-hmm. And then 2022-23 is not yet finalized. And 23-24 is not yet finalized. Okay. And for these years, well, for last year, 23-24, there is 6% of players' contracts, face value of their contracts, being held in that escrow account. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now let's go forward to this year. To this year, approximately 3% of players' face value of contracts have already been withheld and deposited into the escrow account. Mm-hmm. So that money is sitting there. The escrow this season was set before the year per the agreement back in the pandemic of 6%. Okay. So half of that has already been deducted from the players' paychecks and is sitting in that account, which amounts to going across an entire season about 3%.
Okay.
And because NHL revenues are already tracking to be way higher than the 6% withholding, both sides have announced that come January 30th paycheck, there will be zero escrow withholding to players' paychecks from January 30th until the end of the season. There will be no more escrow. Basically from today till the end of the season, last paycheck, April 30th.
So that's enormous. I'm sure players are absolutely thrilled about that. I think my first question, Alan, is, has there ever been a situation like this before since the first triple hard cap system was instituted when the league came back in 2006?
No, but let's go further because you asked it in your previous question. Not only is it expected now that escrow, well, we know escrow is going to stop and be terminated. There will be no more escrow for the rest of the year, but the expectation is all of the monies being held in escrow are going to be returned to the players at the time they do the reconciliation on the season. So the players will get that 3% of the face value of their contract back. They will not have a total of 6% deducted. Plus, it will be a percentage that the league, the clubs, are going to have to pay to the players over and above what is being held in escrow today to equalize at 50-50.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. But I've seen some reports where some people are calling this, profit sharing, and the NHL players are going to get a piece of profit sharing. Let's be very clear here on terminology. There is no profit sharing in the NHL between the league and the players. The CBA, since 2005, and the triple hard cap system has, everyone listen carefully, has nothing to do with profits. Okay. There is no such thing as profit share, net profit, gross profits. Profits have nothing to do with this agreement. It is strictly sharing of defined revenues.
Got it.
Nothing to do with profits.
Right.
Okay. So over and above the total of 6% that was contemplated to be withheld this year, there will be an additional percentage of revenues of the player's contract, face value of their contract that will come back to players. And some of the numbers that I'm hearing out there right now is something like an additional 3 to 4% of the player's contract will be refunded or returned over and above the 3% that has already been withheld.
Right. So if you're the $10 million...
To summarize, 3% withheld, no more withholding.
Yep.
Okay. So that's from now till the end of the year, which would be another 3%. That's going to stay in their paychecks. Plus, when reconciliation happens, and it might happen this summer, it might happen next year, whenever it does happen, the players can expect an additional payment on top of the 3% being held in escrow plus nominal interest. And interest now is set at 4.25% of the monies being held in this escrow account, an additional amount to equaling to around 3% of the face value of their contract. So now go with your 10 million example.
So your $10 million player would have had, if it was a 3% all the way through the year, $300,000 held back. This player is going to get the $300,000 back.
Plus interest.
At
4.25%.
And what would that be? I don't even know. Well, let's not even get into that math. I don't know what the math is, but it's going to be plus interest. And if I'm not mistaken, Alan, more on top of that. Is that correct? At 3%?
Yes. So if we're talking about a $10 million player, an additional approximately $300,000 payment coming back to that player.
They are going to be thrilled about that. That's pretty great. Now, a couple of questions. First one is, why have the calculations dating back to 2021 not been done yet?
It's just a process that takes place between the league and the NHLPA. Okay. The NHLPA has various audit rights. They can choose a number of teams to go in and do forensic audits on their books. And usually in the course of these audits, revenue is discovered that I'm not going to say was intentionally or fraudulently classified, but that may have been missed or may have been some sort of calculation error that gets discovered. And then that gets put into a separate category where it's then subject to further discussions between the PA and the league to agree on how this revenue is then reclassified. Maybe the league thinks it was classified correctly. Maybe the PA thinks it wasn't. And these issues are still outstanding going back to the 21-22 season. So as of today, that year is not finalized. 22-23 is not finalized. And 23-24 is not yet finalized.
And that's, I guess, especially given the pandemic, understandable. There's a lot of lines that people have to go through. It's an expansive process. Okay, fine. Now I got to know, because every team has had a flat cap for more than half a decade. And I'm sure, Alan, much to your chagrin as well, because that directly affects you too. You said it on the last Agent Provocateur, $97 million. $97 million will be the cap next year. Does this mean that the cap could go even further than that this year? Or do they hold to that number and then the next year it's an even bigger jump?
I'm just projecting here and giving you my personal opinion. No one knows the answer to that question right now. It's a great question. Okay. But my feeling is there's going to be a smoothing of increase in the cap. So take it in a 3-year increment, okay, where the expectation is based on where HRR is now and where it's projected to go, taking into account a new Canadian TV rights deal on the horizon, which is going to come in somewhere between 2 and 3x the current number. At some point in time in this 3-year period, a new U.S. national broadcast rights deal, which is going to come in significantly above where it's at now, we can expect that at the end of this next 3-year period for the upper limit to be north of 105 million.
Okay. Wow. Okay. 500. I'm just looking at you said something interesting there. The TV rights deal in American dollars in Canada is worth somewhere in the neighborhood at between 450 and 500 million American dollars every year. And you're saying that the next national TV rights deal, and this includes regional or not?
It does not include regional.
Does not include regional. So this is the national deal. The one that Sportsnet currently holds, that there is rumors that Amazon wants a piece of or all of, will come in at around 1.3 to 1.5 billion per year?
Yes.
American dollars.
Yes. So Gary has been telling the owners that the Canadian deal will come in somewhere 2x to 3x current numbers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So things are looking good for both the league and the players. And, I think probably the league is trying to avoid a Golden State Warriors situation where the cap jumps $30 million over one summer and you're able to throw a dynasty together the way the Warriors were. Would that be the main reason for the cap smoothing? Like, why don't they want a 1 year massive jump?
Well, I think from the player's perspective, the quicker you can get the cap up, the better.
Yeah.
But understand that there has to be a negotiation in place. I think the major argument coming from the league, again, I'm projecting here, and I would anticipate their concerns would be the teams in the bottom third of revenue, and having them to compete and keep up with a $100+ million cap. So what I think is going to happen, if I'm looking at the cap now going 2 and 3 and 4 years into the future, right? That many teams are going to go from being a cap team to being a budget team, where a team will start saying to agents and players, yes, the cap is 102 million or the cap is 105 million, but our internal budget is 95 million.
Right.
So it's no longer, we don't have the cap dollars to pay you. It's going to be, our budget is capped out. We just don't have the money in our budget to pay you.
Wow. Okay.
Which is a different argument getting to the similar place.
Okay. Last question, and I know this is supposed to be 10 minutes. We're pushing 20 here, but it's such a fascinating subject. How much has the move from Arizona to Utah affected this situation? Because Arizona infamously, was a drag on HRR, NHL finances, player salaries for such a long time.
It certainly has an impact. I can't break it down to you and give you an exact percentage of how much this is because of Arizona to Utah, but it's certainly part of it. Also, centralized revenues. The NHL is growing up and becoming more of a business in spite of Gary Bettman in many ways. This has happened contrary to his initiatives and policies over the years. But you can be sure he's going to take all the credit for it, which is fine. But I also think this is going to have a tremendous impact on how deals get negotiated going forward, and players who signed 7 and 8 year deals over the last year or two, I think are going to be somewhat dismayed at the players getting significantly more money than they got.
Right.
As the cap goes up to areas they didn't anticipate.
So you think maybe you see a lot more 2 and 3 year deals for some of the best players in the game, where before we were used to 6 to 8 year deals?
Yeah, I think the only real motivation in signing these 6 to 8 year deals is security, And I think a lot of these players are going to be making enough money on a 2 or 3 year deal to give them that security if they don't already have it, where they're going to have some idea of where the cap is going over the next 3-4 years, and then be able to say, I'm only going to do 2 years.
Right.
And I'm going to retain my ability to go to the market again in 2 years or 3 years and benefit from the huge jump in the cap year over year over year, which is very similar now to what's going on and what happened in the NBA when a similar rise in their cap impacted a move away from long-term deals for the best players in the league.
Right. Yeah, had LeBron James signing rolling 1-year contracts, right? Because the money was just so big. So, Allan Walsh, listen, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday, although I know Saturdays don't exist in your world. Thank you for rolling into work anyway. And are you going to be at any games tonight, or is this a home night where you've got 40 screens open?
All the screens will be going. No Kings game tonight at home for me. But remind everybody, see everybody in London, Ontario next Saturday afternoon. Mm-hmm. We'll be there recording a live podcast of Agent Provocateur at the Ivy Business School. Which is pretty cool. Allan, I'm looking forward to seeing you next weekend, and thanks for making the time today. You got it. Have a great Saturday. Love you guys.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Follow Allan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.